Amazing. Thank you to our live in studio audience. Super excited to be with you guys for another episode of the Young Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Jay, and joining me today on the show is the Director of Clinical Strategy for the Joon app. That's Joon. If you haven't heard of the Joon app yet, well, you're about to hear all about it. And I'm super excited about it because not only is this an app that I use in my own line of work with my own clients and kids and families, but it's also a tool that I use at home with my own kids. So I fully could say it's wonderful. It's super fun. It's great. Um, and the also other exciting part of this show today is that it's a great opportunity for us to announce our partnership with the Joon app that we'll get into toward the very end of this podcast. A little plug there. But joining me is Joe. Like I mentioned, Joe is the Director of Clinical Strategy. He's joining us today to talk more about the Joon app. So, Joe, I'll give the floor to you. Go ahead and introduce yourself, talk a little bit about yourself, and then kind of what your role is with Joon and just the overall involvement with the app and what it is, and explain it to the audience for those who haven't heard of it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, Jay. I'm excited to be here today. So I am the Director of Clinical and Scientific Strategy at Joon. I was, so just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I am a licensed clinical psychologist by training. I spent about 8 years conducting research focused on better understanding kids with behavior problems, things like ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, and delivering treatments to hundreds of families to help improve behavior. And after about 8 years of that, I got really intrigued by the ability of apps to actually be used by families and children. And so I did a little bit of a pivot into basically working with companies to build out research and develop apps that actually can be really useful at helping families. I worked at one company, and then for about a little over a year, and then I learned about Joon, and I was really excited about what Joon had to offer because just to give a little background to the audience about what the Joon app is it's a behavior management platform that basically allows parents to work with their kids to help set their kids up for success. And the way that it does this is by basically merging success in the real world with success in the video game. And this was the most intriguing concept to me, was basically leveraging a video game to actually get kids to complete tasks, things like homework, chores, in the real world. And the way that it works is there's a parent app where the parent can basically assign what we call quests, and these are basically specific chores, homework, different things, behavioral expectations that you have for your child. And the parent assigns those quests, and then the child has a video game where they raise a virtual pet and they earn coins to buy things for their pet, and then they can explore some virtual worlds. But the kicker here is the only way to be successful in the video game and use these coins is to complete your quests that your parent assigns you in the real world. So you have to complete your homework to earn coins, whatever the things are that are on there, whether it's homework, routines, making your bed, brushing your teeth. The child has to do those things, and then after they do those things, the parent's able to award coins, and then the child is actually able to leverage those coins in this virtual world. So parents love it because what they've told us is they see that their child is actually really motivated to do the things that they're asking them to do. And kids love it because they love the game, and what they're doing is they're going back to their parents and saying, "Hey, can I have some more quests, some more things to do, so that I can buy this hat for my virtual pet, and that kind of a thing." And so to me, I saw this concept and I thought this was not something I had seen before. This is I have worked with a lot of families to develop reward charts, things like that. But this was a really novel and innovative way, I think, to sort of get both parents and child on board to sort of work together collaboratively to succeed and to accomplish the things that the parents and the child, ultimately do want to accomplish. And so I reached out to them. They didn't, really have any. They didn't have any research things like going on at that time. But about 6 months later, they got some funding, and they were looking for someone to sort of build out the clinical and scientific direction for the company. So that's where I ended up, how I ended up here. And so now, again, we have a lot of information about from parents about how well this is working, and we just want to continue to follow that up with doing some additional research and partnering with clinicians and therapists to get this into the hands of families that ultimately, hopefully will benefit.
100%. I love that. And it's so true. I mean, I started using this as a therapy tool in my work. I'm a mental health therapist, so I actually work within what's called a WISE program. So it's a wraparound with intensive services. And so we work with the family, the youth. So we work with the caregivers and the youth. And this was actually brought to me by a family a few months ago saying, we just tried this app. I'm like, I've never heard of that. Let me look into it, because we like to make sure that our families are using like reputable things, because there's so many apps
Yep.
and things out there that aren't that. And so I looked into it and I'm like, whoa, this is really cool. This is definitely different. Like I hadn't seen, like you said, I hadn't seen anything like this before. I hadn't seen a game that was essentially controlled by parents, but the kids also controlled it at the same time. So it brings in that ever so important like shared control factor, which is so hard for a lot of parents, especially parents with kids with big behaviors or ADHD or ODD, like you had mentioned. Those things are really hard. Those parents have a really hard time sharing that control, because those kids
Yep.
usually take a couple steps and then they're a mile down the road a few seconds later with it. So it helps it stay controlled in that environment, which I really like. And you can't see my hands. I'm doing this thing right here. They're sharing that control. They're meshing.
Right.
Um, and then I'm like, okay, I started using it with this family specifically for I want to say I used it for like 2 months. And then I'm like, I want to do something else with it. I want to try it at home. I see how it's working for them, but I want to try it in my home before I really recommend it to anyone else. So then I brought it in home with my own daughter, who a few weeks ago really, really started to struggle with who knows what. Trying to bring her more structure, routine, fun, all these different things. My oldest daughter, she's 6, going on 7 this year in 2024. And so I'm like, maybe this will work. She really likes apps. She's really into, like, we have an extra phone, so just putting it on there won't be a big deal. She picks up the concepts really quick, and then if I just explain to her like these are her quests, and then she gets coins, and then she gets to cash the coins in for real life things, but also take care of her pet. I think this will be a no-brainer win-win for her, and it absolutely has. Like, she looks forward to it every morning, every day when she gets home from school, every night. She goes through, she double checks her tasks like after dinner. She's like, okay, what do I have to do? How do I have to do it? But she knows how to do all the tasks. Um, the best part about it, I say, is that the kids don't get, and this is probably one of my favorite parts from a therapy perspective and from a family perspective, is that yes, they get to check off the task to get the coins, essentially, to get the instant gratification reward. So that little dopamine hit that everyone's always looking for, that quick gratification, is right there. But it's also delayed at the exact same time, which is such a hard concept to actually bring into a home and into real life with a lot of kids, because kids just want the instant gratification. They don't want anything delayed. But with this,
Yeah.
it forces that delayed, because a parent, I could go 2, 3 days without approving tasks, even though I'll get notifications that I need to approve tasks. I could go a day or two without approving tasks to make her wait. But then I can, if she cleaned the kitchen table that night, and let's say it was cleaned just not very poorly, I can reduce the amount of coin, and I could put a note in there saying the kitchen table was cleaned pretty poorly. It was still dirty. This wasn't your best work, and I can reduce the reward. So even though she's completing it to her, there's still that chance to go back and double check, which I think is so important, because a lot of times as parents, we don't, it forces us as parents to go and double check to make sure that things were actually done, and done in a way that was, I want to say, like it, but like satisfactory, or well enough,
Absolutely.
uh, kind of thing. So that part of it, making the parents and the caregivers be involved in it, is super important. And I think another great part of it that is here, I wasn't sure if you mentioned, you can tailor it per child. So if you have multiple children,
Yeah.
I just think that's so cool. So I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. So I can tailor my 3-year-old's task to her. So her list is a lot
Hmm.
shorter, like a lot shorter. But my 6-year-old has all these things to like do or to try to do or to get done. And I'm still tweaking it for her. It's definitely a learning curve, like when you're taking it from therapy to in home and just trying to tweak it for her. Like, okay, maybe there's too many tasks here, or that task doesn't really make sense. Oh, but this one does. And there's just so many options. There's already so many preloaded options for what people are using,
Hmm.
what other parents are using. And it's continuously updating itself too. Because I'll go in and see like the most common ones that parents are using like today. 3 days ago, those were all
Yep.
different. And that's so cool to see like, okay, what are we all kind of struggling with our kids with these same kind of behaviors, diagnoses, and whatnot. So it definitely helps you feel not alone because it's like, oh, I'm not the only parent that struggles with their kid brushing their teeth or brushing their hair or cleaning
Yeah.
up their toys or all these things. So it lets you know, like, oh, we're all kind of trying to do the same thing together. Um, so it helps kind of bring a lot of reassurance and and it just takes so much guesswork out of it for parents because it's
Yeah.
kid driven, and if the kid doesn't do it, they don't get the reward. And the rewards are, of course, taking care of their pets. My daughter has 2 pets now. Um, but the other reward is getting to do real life things, which I think is really cool. So I set her bars really
Yeah.
high
That's
because
a that's
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's another piece of this is you can earn rewards to use in the game where you're raising your pet, but also parents can also tailor it to where if there's rewards they want to give outside of the game, like getting to stay up 15 minutes later, getting 30 minutes on the iPad, they can set that up in the app as well, and then kids can redeem those for 30 coins here for getting to stay up late or something like that. So absolutely, it has both of those components, which is really great.
Yeah. And you can filter it for what you want versus what you don't want in the
Yep.
app, or what you want your kids doing versus not doing, or doing on certain days of the week or weekends, or you know there's just so many options. Or if there's something that works for with you in your home versus what's already kind of preloaded in the app, pre-templated, you can change those templates
Yep.
because they're just templates, they're just suggestions. You can change it to the days of the week, time of the day, however many coins. Like if it says suggested 20 coins, but that's like an easy and medium hard task. But for your kid, it's an extremely hard task. You can change that to 30 coins as an extremely hard task and reset your own baseline based on these different things. And it's continually also taking your own feedback, which I think is really cool because it'll ask you every time you go and review individual tasks, unless you just do review all and you just say approve all kind of thing,
Sure.
um, which I've done a few times, guilty, but you can go in and you can review every task and think about it. How hard was it to get your child to complete this task today? And load in your own real time feedback and make those adjustments as you go and get suggestions and adjustments as you go, which is so important because some days are going to be harder than others, and you want to see how your kid's trending, which I think is a really key
Yep.
aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea here, and a lot of these things you touched on, but is look for all kids, there are certain core things that are going to be helpful, right? Like the things you touched on is we know consistency works for all kids, no matter what they're struggling with. Being consistent, key thing. That goes along with routines, right? Routines are super helpful for any kid, just like they're super helpful for any adult. So routine, also recognition, right? And recognition in the sense of, you mentioned being able to go back and review, like, how well did my daughter clean up the kitchen table? Um, so one of the things that we know happens is a lot of kids, when you set up any sort of like expectations around like, doing your homework, clearing off the table, brushing your teeth, making your bed, cleaning your room, whatever it happens to be, is that a lot of time we're so busy, right? Particularly parents, so busy. But it can be hard to remember, like, hey, what were those three things that I asked my child to do? And even harder to go back and say, okay, I'm going to hold myself accountable and I'm going to go make sure that like those things were done. And so what ends up happening is uh, either on one hand, kind of what you alluded to, which is the task isn't done at all, or if the task is done, it's sort of done sort of below expectations, and you give that feedback. But the other piece, and the other thing that often happens is a task is actually done and it's done correctly, and no feedback is ever given to the kids, right? Because the parents sort of moved on, they're on the phone, they're, whatever, like, life is busy, we're all busy. And so what the app sort of tries to do is it sort of embeds these principles around routines, consistency, accountability, to allow the child and the parent to collaborate and work together, so that everybody sort of knows what the expectations are, but also everybody's getting acknowledgement, recognition for achieving and meeting those expectations. And one of the key things that we do as parents, as kids develop over time, is we do, so the technical term for this is what's called scaffolding, right? The idea that we want to get our kid from point A to point Z, but we can't get them from point A, just, go 0 to 100 and get to Z that quickly. And so we scaffold them, meaning we kind of push them a little to get to B, from A to B. And then when they get to B, we push them a little more to get from B to C. And so we're doing this scaffolding all throughout development. And what the app allows us to do is it allows us to do that in a way to basically be able to give that level of feedback that, incorporates this scaffolding principle to say, hey, look, I've been asking my, son to do this task for a week. They're having a really tough time. Let me be a little reflective here about, like, is this task too hard for them? Should I break it down? Should I think about it differently? Should I reward more points in order to like better motivate them? And so all of those features are sort of built in there. So there's these sort of consistent pieces that every parent uses. But then the last point that you really touched on is, but there's this incredible amount of flexibility around how a parent wants to actually use Joon. How many points do they want to assign for a task? Do they want to come up with their own tasks? Do they want to use tasks that are common tasks that, get used by a lot of parents of kids between, 6 and 9 or something like that? And so, by putting all of these things that we know sort of help and work, you're sort of reducing a lot of the burden on, just how overwhelming at times it can be for parents. And I think this is why the idea has really resonated with parents and then also with kids, because, parents are like, oh, I don't have to nag them as much. I don't have to keep track of all the different things that I have in my head. We put all his homework assignments in the app. And so now, that's all in there and I can go back and review it on my own time. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the idea, is basically just trying to reduce a lot of the challenges there are, and having sort of a tracking system where parents and kids sort of all know what the expectations are. They're all on the same page, and ultimately that just helps everybody, right, in the family, and hopefully reduces conflict and that kind of a thing. So.
No, very true. And I think that's kind of the key part that I really saw for it from a therapy point of view is the elimination of, and it's hard to tell a parent or to tell a client that there's unnecessary communication going on, but that's kind of like the
Sure.
nagging and the reminders and whatnot. A kid with ODD or ADHD, the last thing they need sometimes is those consistent like reminders and nagging. Do this, do that, do this, do that. They know kids with ADHD or ODD are, at least for in my work that I've worked with, are probably some of my more capable kids. Um, they're a little bit faster, they're a little bit smarter, they're a little bit more self-aware, they're a little bit quicker on their feet, um, because they just are. This is how their brain works. That's how their neurodivergencies actually benefit them. And their parents just see these diagnoses like, oh, they're just so oppositional, they're so defiant, they're so like hard, they're so hard. But when we really look at that, or like with ADHD, they're fidgety, they're all over the place, they don't focus, they can't focus for a long period of time. But at the same time, those are also superpowers, like legitimate, like human superpowers to an extent, because they can do things so quickly, they can think so much quicker, they have to be quicker on their feet to be defiant. um, and to be able to work through a different task and whatnot. And so it's really fun. But this app, the June app, really takes away that, kind of cuts out that middle ground, and helps just mesh, because it can be really hard for a parent and a child with these behaviors or diagnoses to mesh, because the parent probably just straight up doesn't know how. They weren't expecting it. They don't know how to deal with it unless they themselves are also that same way and have worked through it. Then they have a couple more tools in the tool bag to work with. But Jude essentially
Sure.
gives that tool. It's like, okay, here you go. This is all your things you need to do. It gives that full autonomy, which is so important, not only for all children, but specifically, at least, I mean, I keep mentioning ODD and ADHD, but for those kids to have that autonomy to do things on their own time frame, within their own focus limits, within their own deficits, within their own oppositional moments or defiant moments, it gives them that autonomy to still do the things without getting in trouble for not doing while doing other things, and not getting nagged and
Yeah.
creating a bigger problem. So even less gets done. Because as you and I well
Well,
know,
yeah,
go ahead. Oh no. So it's like, as you and I well know, like the more we nag, the more we get involved, the more we engage, the more that it comes back on us, and it creates even more and less gets done.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's the other key piece of this is, I've done a lot of work with families, to develop behavioral plans, right? And a lot of times it really is, the kid is involved, the child is involved to some degree. But I think what the app really does is it helps to, uh, you know, this isn't a parent problem, it's not a child problem. It's a let's work together and sort of solve and move the needle on improving these things. And I think it's a key critical thing by having that child involvement. Not only is everything you said true, but also this idea of the child also learning some level of independence, right? Some level of having to be accountable for their own behaviors and actions and the things that they're doing. And they have to do that, right? So they have to sort of give that feedback of like, hey, I did this thing. Like, okay, can you approve it? And then can I earn my coins? And teaching that independence is so critical, particularly at younger ages, and is going to really help uh, foster the development, right, as the child gets older, for them to be able to remember to do things like, take notes in class, write down my homework, make lists, the things that are all going to sort of help them uh, as far as general life skills, right, long term as they go into adolescence, young adulthood, and beyond. So, yeah, absolutely.
And you can also, like, even within that, you can also create little rewards for things that they already do. So you don't have to
Yep.
restructure like a whole new routine. Like when I've had a couple parents get this app, they're like, okay, this gives me an opportunity to completely change and do everything over, start from ground zero, which is great for some kids. Not some, very few. I would say majority need to keep it consistent, and then, like you said, that scaffolding, add on a little bit. Go a week or
Yep.
two, reward for the things they're already doing super well. Like, that they already brush their teeth every single day and they're religious about it, because that's just how their brain works. That's what they hyper focus on, is their hygiene. And so their hygiene's already great. Well, let's reward that then. Go ahead and just do some 2 coin tasks for brushing your teeth, brushing your hair. Let's do 10
Yep.
coins for just they did their morning routine, they did their nighttime hygiene routine. Let's just throw 10 coins in there. They wash their hands, throw 2 coins their way, kind of thing. Let them feel good about it, because maybe they're in their heads are like, man, I can't not do this hygiene because it's like all I can think about. But now they have a reward and they're like, oh, this is actually just a normal thing now. I'm not weird. I'm not
Yeah.
different. Because who knows what they're being told at school? Maybe they're the kid that's always washing their hands, always pumping hand sanitizer before they touch or do anything. Maybe they just breathe some air and they're like feeling germy, so they clean their hands or ask to go wash your face or something, and they're getting made fun of in school. So the last thing they need is at home to feel like they're a freak for being clean. But now they're in this app, it gives them just that space to just be like, oh, I get coins for doing these things that I feel so weird for doing, but I'm normal in this moment. kind of thing. So it helps bring so much normalcy to kids and to families around, and it makes things so much easier. Chores are easier, homework's easier, because like you said, it's back on the kid and they have to own it.
Yeah, well, I think you touched on this super important point too of I call these quick wins, like when I work with families is when you're developing or using something like this, or whether it's pen and paper with or with June, a lot of times the sort of knee jerk reaction is, well, here's all the 5 to 10 things that I know they're not doing at all, and so I'm going to just put all of those in there. And usually I will stop a parent and ask, what do you think the outcome is going to be if the child doesn't do any of these things that they're not already doing? And the parent's like, well, they're not going to earn any coins. Right. They're not going to earn any coins, which means they're also going to not know what the value of any of those coins are, because they're going to go into the app and not really be able to purchase any of the items that they want to purchase. And so what we want to do is we want to structure it in a way that allows them to get some quick wins, in addition to some of this other stuff that you want to focus on, but get quick wins so that there's some buy-in by the child in terms of, oh, here's some things I'm already doing. I'm earning these coins, and those coins allow me to explore the world a little more, buy new stuff for my, virtual pet, whatever it is that they're doing in the game. Now, you don't want to overcorrect, right? Where you're like, oh, I'm just going to give them, 10,000 coins, and now they don't have to really do any of the expectations I have because they do, brush their teeth, which they've always done, and they earn all the coins, and they, but the idea is you want a mixture, of some quick wins along with some things that are going to be sort of more challenging behaviors that are, maybe they're not doing any of their homework. It's like, so let's put homework on there, but let's also think about some things they're already doing. And like, I like your strategy of, you don't have to award as many coins for those things, but you start small and then you kind of go from there. So absolutely, that can be a beneficial strategy, I think.
100%. And I think that what you hit on there is so important. Two things you hit on there. Starting small. One thing, and the whole time I've worked in the program I work in, is re-emphasizing, overemphasizing with parents and caregivers and kids even, to start so small. Start with the smallest thing. Let's start with just one coping skill. Let's start with one identification of communication styles. Let's start with just one thing for this thing. Let's not think let's also think big picture at the same time, but let's think the small steps on how we get there. And once we start making these small steps, let's celebrate each and every win and success, because that is so
Yep.
important. You got to stack those wins. Again, it goes back to the scaffolding. That is, like you said, the best way to put it here with that scaffolding. But you're building, each of those wins is a piece on the scaffolding. Each of those small steps is a piece of the scaffolding. Maybe it's a bolt. Maybe it's a nut. Maybe it's a metal wire, or why did I say wire? A metal rod kind of thing. Maybe it's that orange fencing on the ground or whatever to block off the area you're building. Whatever it is, like those are all so important and vital, and those are missed so often just within parenting, within life as adults. We don't reward ourselves enough. But with June, it makes
Hmm.
it so we have to reward our kids, but also at the same time, like kind of reward ourselves for not for realizing, oh, things are so much better. Why are they better? Oh, because my kids are doing their things. I'm not blowing up and getting mad. I'm calmer, so our relationship's starting to improve. So those things kind of happen more so organically in a sense, because they're unconscious things that are happening. They're not, because the parents aren't getting any rewards. I would love a June version for adults, because I think, as you said, it would be so beneficial. Because, and I say that for the reason because, like you mentioned, we're busy. Consistency is so
Yeah.
important. Routine is so important for children and adults. But we don't take time a lot of the time. Most parents, at least I work with in my line of work, they don't take that time for themselves, to reward themselves, to give themselves a pat on the back, a couple coins, to take care of a pet, to feel like a kid. I mean, a lot of the parents I work with, we all grew up in the 80s and 90s. We all had Tamagotchis. Um,
Yep.
this is a very kind of updated way, at least for kids, to have a Tamagotchi in a sense, with their daughters.
Yep.
Uh, But it'd be really cool to have like an adult version, because not only then we can build our own coins for our own rewards, but it forces us to do things for ourselves, to go and allow ourselves to get that coffee, or to get, um, I'll say it, I'm secure enough in my own masculinity. I'll go and get a manicure. Um, I would have to get like 1,000 coins, but if I got 1,000 coins, obviously I have it. I earned it. I did all the things, like that's so important to me. Like I can go and do that. I deserve that. I earned that kind of thing. Because as parents, we want to teach these things to our kids to earn the things that they want, to work for it. But we're working all the time, yet not rewarding ourselves in any way with that sense. So
Yep.
definitely something that would be really cool to have a June adult version. Um, would be cool,
We get that
but
request a lot, actually. Yeah, we get that request a lot from parents that have had success with the app. Is it would be neat to have a June adult version. I think again, going back to all the reasons you're saying, right? Is
mm,
we don't reward ourselves enough. I mean, I definitely have friends and have talked with people that set up their own cognitive reward systems like this, where they say like, I'm really craving a Starbucks, latte, but I'm gonna have to finish this project I'm working on at work, and I won't go get it until I finish that project at work. And so naturally, a lot of people will do this type of a thing.
mm.
But to have something in front of you reminding you, right, and holding you accountable, and that's yeah, I think that it benefits not only kids but certainly also adults to some degree.
And I think just June at the same time really helps us parents raise kids who are able to thrive. The world is chaos, as you very well know. Being a dad, being a parent, it's chaos out there. And we have to raise such strong, resilient, organized, optimistic, and well-rounded kids to make sure that they can navigate the chaos. Um, a lot of kids now, just because of kind of how us parents are raised that are raising kids now, our world wasn't quite as chaotic. We've kind of grown into adulthood through the chaos, so the chaos has kind of been navigated as we get older, as we get more cognitively aware and smart.
Okay.
But for our kids, they're just coming into the chaos. They're coming into all the things that we kind of grew up in and were able to navigate slowly. For them, it's just a bam, semi truck, train hitting you. Um, but that's one thing I love about June and about the work I do and about being a dad myself, is just that we are trying to raise kids who are like personally thriving, and that they're going to go out into the world and they're going to thrive in different professional environments, personal environment, while also, kind of like you mentioned here, uh, in our questionnaire, the goal is to raise kids who thrive personally, professionally, while also improving the world in some way. Uh, because that's what
Yep.
it's all about. We have to put out kids who are productive into the world, because the world needs that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there, and that's I think the goal, right, with June is basically to sort of help parents accomplish that goal, and whatever we can do to help facilitate that, that's our mission.
100%.
Because
So
when you have kids, there's no manual, right? It's like, all right,
no,
here's kids, and we don't get a manual as parents, and so any sort of tools like this that I think can help facilitate achieving that goal is something that hopefully people find worthwhile.
100%. So I've had to have the conversation a few times with the app and working with some families. Is, well, now they're going to be on a screen more. This is going to require them to
Hmm.
be on a screen more. And that conversation I've had to have is to justify this app as like a routine thing that's not going to count against their unproductive screen time. And I've had to explain like productive versus unproductive screen time. Video games, TVs, movies, games, those are apps, and like games on the iPad and stuff. Those are unproductive screen time. But there is a productive screen time, like school time on a screen. That's more or less productive. if they're playing like Khan
Absolutely.
Academy or math games or whatever, like those are productive versions of screen time. But I've had a couple parents be like, well, we can't do this because we already limit screen time to such an extreme. This would be an exception. Like it's a game. Like how can I allow my kid to play a game and be on a screen? Like that goes against kind of what I'm trying to do here. So how do you in your role perspective with the app kind of help change that narrative with parents?
Yeah, so I think you kind of nailed it, right? Which is this idea that like there's this big umbrella screen time idea, right? And there's a lot of conflicting information around like, screen time, is it bad? Is it good? It's a very similar type of conundrum as like social media, right? Like, is it good? Is it bad? And I think the idea here is these are really technologies that are actually relatively neutral. And it's really about how we're using them and what we're doing with them. And there's some research evidence that actually backs this in terms of, you know, there are TV shows, educational TV shows that can be helpful for kids, and that is screen time, right? In that sense. And then there's a lot of TV shows for kids that have no therapeutic elements, no educational elements, and that is just it's just fun, right? And that's okay too, because fun, we all need some fun in our lives. But the idea with this is what is the purpose of the screen time that's being given, when using an app like June? And the idea is our child is learning something, right? And it's not learning in like the traditional sort of like school homework type of a thing, but it's learning in terms of learning how to behave and interact with the world in a productive way, achieving expectations, meeting consistent expectations, doing the things that the people around me in my life are expecting me to do. So I think that, all just to reiterate what you said makes a lot of sense. But then the other piece of this, for parents is one, they're able to sort of control, how much screen time the child's actually getting, right? So you can set expectations around that. I mean, if it's really challenging things, set a quest that says, only plays with it for 15 minutes, and then if they do that, approved, they get the coins, and then the next day they can go back in and do the app. Um, but also, as the child sort of redeems their coins, their ability to interact in the virtual world is also going to be restricted, right? So this isn't like a game that sort of just goes on and on forever, but it's like until they do more quests, until they do more sort of things that you've sort of laid out for them, they're not going to be able to do a whole lot in the app, right? And then the final piece of this is, let's say there's still resistance there, is to go back to this idea that you can set up physical in real world rewards as well, right? And so maybe the app then gets used as an accounting system, but the coins are not redeemed necessarily for gameplay in the June app, but are redeemed for getting to pick a dessert for the night, getting to watch a movie, whatever it is that the parent wants to use. And so that's sort of how I would go about addressing that.
I love that. I love that. All right. Let's jump into our YDP3. Before that, though, do you have anything else that you want to mention about the app itself that we haven't touched on? I think we touch on almost all the big key parts, I think at least. But is there anything else specifically that you want to touch on about the app, just for the listeners that they absolutely need to know?
Yeah, so I think we touched on the key pieces of the app. The third component of this, though, that I do want to make sure we plug is kind of how you came about the app. So we're hearing from a lot of treatment providers that are saying, "Hey, I heard about this app from a family that I was already working with," and the so what happened is we started building out what we call clinician tooling, where treatment providers actually can connect families to the app, and they can actually visualize and see the progress that the child is making on achieving whatever goals are being laid out. And that can be used, in a therapeutic context as a provider sort of working with the family to set up a behavior plan to actually go through that with the parents directly, but then also kind of connect. And they're going to be getting sort of ongoing feedback about what the time in between sessions looks like, in the house. Like how often is the child actually, completing these tasks? And so that clinician tooling is something that may be helpful for a lot of, therapists or treatment providers. And then the other thing is, if a parent connects or a clinician connects to each other, there's a 25% discount on the annual fee for the app. So you can learn more about all this at our website, joonapp.io. But I did want to make sure I mentioned that clinician component of it because we think that's going to be, a real vital component of this as well for families.
100%, and that is super important. Um, yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for all the information. We touched on a lot of good stuff. June is just it's packed full of just goodness, structure, routine, accountability, tools, resources. It really just gives you as a parent this tool that has this tool bag essentially. It's definitely just like handing a parent like here's a tool bag of all these pre-planned tools and everything. All you have to do is click a couple boxes and you have tools now. Like it just takes
Yep.
it takes all the guesswork out of it, and I think that's by far the most elite part of the app is sorry, my millennial was just showing. Um it's like it's just so elite. It's that next level that takes it just out of our heads as parents trying to raise kids in 2024 and gives us tools and strategies and ways to parent differently and better and more efficiently. Because the name of the game is efficiency. If we can get our
Yep.
kids onto
Absolutely.
an app to do their tasks, then we have more time to then spend with them because essentially the app helps them build the habit, do the things quicker, changes the behavior a little bit, enough for us to do more fun things together. Um, because we now know, like, oh, hey, we're getting help with the dishes, we're getting help with the table, we're getting help with cleaning up toys. Like, it's not just all on our shoulders. A little bit's off of us now,
Yep.
and it's on them. And it's like, oh, I can breathe. I can parent. I can have fun
Yep.
with my kids a little bit. I can play. I have an excuse to play games with them. I have an excuse to watch a movie with them. Like before, that wasn't a possibility because nothing was getting done. They were unproductive. They were bad. Their behavior was bad. But now it's like I have no excuse, and they earned it. So now I have to follow through. You have to follow through with this app um, if you want to see that consistent change. If your kid cashes in a candy,
Yep.
like my daughter cashed in a candy over the weekend, and we had to go to the dollar store to get her a candy.
Yep.
Was I expecting a dollar store trip? No, but she did it. She earned it, and it was time to cash it in. So it's my turn to. She did all her things and did her portion of it. Now it's time for me to do mine. So, key component over there is make sure you follow up and make sure you follow through for your kid, or it's not going to work essentially. But let's jump into the YDP3 here to kind of get us wrapped up a little bit. The first question here is where are you rooted? And rooted can mean like physically rooted, like where do you call home, but also like core values, kind of what makes up like the person that is Joe.
That's a tough one. Uh, so I would say, so physically, I'm from Florida, born and raised in Florida, and I'm a big. My happy place is definitely anything on the water. So that could be lake, uh, beach, but there's just something about that just takes me to a different place. In terms of core values, that one's pretty easy for me. I think integrity is the key piece, right? And so that's something I'm obviously trying to imbue in my kids as well. But integrity, honesty, and hard work. I think uh, we all have something to contribute and in the world. And I think at the end of the day, we just have to leverage our passions and our skills in a way that gives back. And it's not always going to be easy, but you got to roll up your sleeves and um, you know do that hard work, but also make sure you're doing it with integrity and honesty.
I love that. And you kind of answered the second question in the first question. The second question was what grounds you. You kind of mentioned that with like
Oh,
water, the beach, putting your toes in the
yeah.
sand, putting your toes in the water. So I'll give you a pass on that one. Uh, kind of worked ahead of me. This always happens when I work with other professionals in the field. They kind of catch on pretty quickly and answer two questions at once. So, but the last question
Yeah.
here is: I come to you. I'm just some random parent. We're on the beach in Florida, and which sounds lovely right now. It's like 20 degrees here, um, in Washington. But I come to you. I just walk up to you on the beach. I'm like, this guy looks like he has it together. You're playing with your family and whatnot. I'm like, bro, I know I don't know you. You don't know me. But I'm struggling with what I got going on over there. My kids, their behavior. I'm struggling with myself. You get to tell me one, maybe one and a half pieces of wisdom or advice that you're embarking on me in that moment.
Wow. Hmm. Just one.
One and a half.
That
One
is
and a half.
one and a half. Um, uh, I think the piece of advice that I would give is to figure out where you're at and go from there, rather than sort of trying to wipe the slate clean, rather than trying to build from the ground up, but to recognize that we're all at a we all have a starting place, and that starting place is different for each of us. And to ask yourself, if I start from here, what is it that I can do to get to the next step? And stop trying to get to sort of the end goal, but to think about it as, what is the skill set I have now? What are the things that I'm capable of doing now? What is the information that I have in this moment, in order for me just to move one tiny step forward, and then just keep doing that. And if you do that every day, over and over and over again, ultimately, eventually, you'll end up where it is that you want to end up. And you'll look back and you'll say, that seemed so overwhelming at the time, but it really wasn't, right? And I think that's the piece of advice that I would give, in how you're raising your kids, how you interact in your day-to-day work life, whatever it is. I think that is a valuable approach.
I love that. I appreciate that. Well, Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Very last question for you, because it's kind of a staple of the show. Does pineapple go on pizza?
Yeah, so I saw this when I scheduled this meeting. I'm trying to recall because I had two answers. I think my diplomatic answer, this is the one I gave in that survey, was something along the lines of, sure, if you have something else to serve, at the get together or something like that. But my first response was really going to be something like, only if you don't want people to come back to your house for pizza. But then I realized this is a very contentious issue. This is in my own household. This is a very contentious issue. But I will land hard on, absolutely not under any circumstances does pineapple belong on a pizza. So hopefully
Yep.
it doesn't alienate you or your listeners, but
No, it's
that's my position on it.
it's kind of always been like a running thing on the show since the very beginning. I don't know how. I think it just ended up in one of our very first like debate episodes, this or that, yes or no, and it's kind of just stuck throughout the last year and a half. So, um, but I'm
And
gonna
it's
plug
not even
June
a
for us.
debatable issue. In my opinion,
No,
it's not even debatable. It's like, I'll debate anything with you, but I won't debate that.
no,
So
I will go to fisticuffs with you, but this is a mountain that I will die on with you. Is that absolutely not. But I've had plenty of other guests that are like, well, it can go on others, but it's just not for me. Very like kind and gentle, and it's an absolutely not. It's an absolute. It's an absolute. Um, but it's probably one of my favorite. I think that's why Brad decided not to book with me, and he threw this to you to do instead. Um,
maybe.
so, but let me just plug June one more time here. Um, Drive positive behavior change with June. If your child is struggling with behavior, habits, or routines while at school or at home, if they are, well, might be worth a look. This new revolutionary app combines a video game that kids love with important tasks and habits that you want them to practice daily. You can give the app a try for free. Yes, for free with my code YNGDAD. So the cool way to spell young dad. YNGDAD. And you can earn 25% off your annual subscription with my code. So see why 5,000 families, mine included, and 1,000 therapists, also me included in that 1,000, why we are recommending June. Visit JOONApp.io/young dad. That's YOUNGDAD to learn more. And again, the code for the app for that discount to try for free is YNGDAD. Joe, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to pick your brain, learn a little bit more about the Joon app. And we are so excited. I am beyond excited to be working with you guys, to be in with you guys in 2024, and to see where this app grows in the coming years, and to work with you guys just on a completely different level, not only as a clinician and a parent, but also as a supporter and promoter of the app and a voice to help get it into more hands and with more families. So I'm so excited for it. So excited to work with you guys and for all the good things that are going to come in 2024, not only to Joon, but also to the podcast. So I'm really excited to be working together.
Yeah, absolutely. Us too. I really, really appreciate you having me on the podcast, and this has been great. It's been excellent to hear your perspective and to learn so much from you. So I appreciate you having me.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate that. Well, we'll let the audience, let's see if they're still awake out there. They are. We'll see you guys next time.